Why does Mark Zuckerberg have so much money? Because he earned more than he spent. Why did France win the World Cup? Because they scored more goals than they conceded. Why are people overweight? Because they took in more calories than they required. All these statements are true, but they're not particularly helpful. Calorie counting can induce weight loss, but of what kind? Are we losing fat? Are we losing muscle? Are we losing other structural tissues such as bone? Or are we just losing water? And if we are losing fat, what kind of fat are we losing? Are we losing visceral fat, the fat that gives you that big belly? Or are we losing subcutaneous fat? Pediatric endocrinologist Robert Lustig points out in his book, Fat Chance, that several studies show that the amount of subcutaneous fat you have, fat under the skin, correlates with longevity, while visceral fat, fat surrounding the organs, can cause inflammation, which is one of the most detrimental things to one's health, and could be the difference between someone dying early in their 50s and someone going on to live far, far longer. Jonathan Baylor, in his book The Calorie Myth, points out that studies show that up to 70% of the non-water weight lost when people eat less comes from muscle, not from fat. We all know that fat is a kind of energy storage, but why would our body choose to burn fat over muscle when muscle is such an energy expensive tissue? By burning muscle, you gain energy in the form of glucose by converting those muscle proteins into glucose via a process known as gluconeogenesis, and you also in the future require less energy due to having less muscle. The problem with the calories in, calories out theory is it doesn't tell you how to put your body in this environment where you're burning fat and not burning muscle. And it doesn't take into account how all nutrients are processed in a slightly different way within the body, and they affect hormones and biochemical processes in a slightly different way. A good example is alcohol. Alcohol is 10% metabolized by the brain, making you drunk, and it's 80% metabolized by the liver, leading to liver disease and other conditions. So we can see that the calories from alcohol have a very different effect compared to calories from other foods. Now onto protein. So protein is broken down into amino acids which are released into the blood, and these can be used for either protein synthesis, muscle growth, or they can be broken down into glucose or fatty acids. Which process your body chooses, however, depends on a variety of factors, such as levels of stored fat and stored glycogen, hormone levels, and how much muscle you have already. Fats. So fats are broken down into what are known as free fatty acids, and these are either broken down by your cell's mitochondria for energy, or they're stored in fat tissue. There are also good fats and bad fats. Bad fats include trans fats, which have been linked to heart disease and stroke. And this is in comparison to good fats, such as DHA, the omega-3, which has been theorized to help humans evolve their big brains. Then there's glucose, the carbohydrate found in rice, vegetables, etc. When glucose enters the bloodstream, it stimulates the release of a hormone called insulin. Insulin allows glucose into your cells, where it can be used for energy or be stored as glycogen. If glycogen stores are full, however, or if a lot of glucose enters the body at one time, glucose may be stored as fat after being converted by the liver in a process known as de novo lipogenesis, new fat making. Insulin is what makes all of this possible. So let's talk about insulin real quick. Insulin is often called the fat storage hormone. It is responsible for the movement of nutrients from the bloodstream into the fat, muscle, or liver cells. Insulin is also released in response to protein intake, but in lesser amounts compared to carbohydrates, and barely at all in response to fat intake. Carbohydrates are known to be the most insulinogenic food, i.e. they cause the largest amount of insulin release, and are therefore the most likely to put on body fat. Insulin also deactivates an enzyme called hormone-sensitive lipase, whose role is to break down that stored body fat so it can be released and burnt off. This means that even the smallest amount of carbohydrates within your daily diet could inhibit fat loss by deactivating hormone-sensitive lipase. Furthermore, if one doesn't eat for a few hours after carbohydrate consumption, they are often left feeling hungry and lethargic because they simply cannot mobilize that fat due to the deactivation of hormone-sensitive lipase. Insulin also blocks a hormone called leptin. This is the satiety hormone that tells you when it's time to stop eating. This is why consumption of refined carbohydrates, added sugars, etc. can lead to hunger and feelings of lethargy, even in people with an abundance of stored body fat. In light of this, we can say that most of dieting is just about lowering insulin, increasing leptin so we feel less hungry, and increasing the activity of hormone-sensitive lipase so we're able to burn more fat. The problem is that most people are being given the wrong advice when it comes to dieting. We are constantly being told that dieting is this terrible chore that is solely fueled by willpower and is composed of restricting as many calories as possible and exercising to excessive degrees. In all actuality, as I've just said, it's just about reducing insulin. Now, there are multiple tricks we can use to help us reduce insulin, such as intermittent fasting, low carbohydrate or ketogenic diets, reducing artificial sweetener intake. The list goes on. And without reducing insulin, you are incredibly unlikely to succeed in your weight loss goals because of the hunger, lethargy, and inability to break down stored body fat